Welcome back to All About Law and History. Today we begin a two-part series on one of the most extraordinary events in the Indian Ocean, the 1981 failed coup attempt in Seychelles. It was led by the infamous mercenary Mike Hoare. His account, the Seychelles Affair, reads like a thriller, but this actually happened.
That's right. It's a fascinating tale, full of twists and turns. In this first part, we'll focus on the build-up to the coup, the execution, and the dramatic failure. It's a story that brings together politics, mercenaries, and chaos.
Absolutely. To start, the political situation in Seychelles was unstable. In 1977, President France Albert René came to power in a coup, overthrowing James Mancham. René's rise to power marked a shift towards a socialist government. But those loyal to the old regime were not content to just fade away.
And that's where Mike Hoare enters the picture. For those who don't know, Mike Hoare was a mercenary commander with a reputation for being tough, strategic, and, well, a bit of a wild card. He had previously been involved in military operations in places like the Congo, and he had a long track record of working as a mercenary.
He was hired to help restore James Mancham's government. Hoare's task was to assemble a team and plan a coup to oust René and bring Mancham back to power. And that's when Operation Angela was born.
That's right. Hoare recruited about 50 men, mostly South Africans, and they set off for Seychelles under the guise of a rugby team. They even packed toys in their luggage to cover up the weapons they were carrying. It was a pretty bizarre cover story.
The plan was to seize key locations in Seychelles, like the airport, the barracks, and the radio station, all within a matter of hours. They were aiming for a quick, coordinated takeover.
But, as with most covert operations, things didn't go according to plan. On November 25, 1981, the mercenaries arrived at Mahé International Airport. That's when disaster struck.
Yes, a customs officer discovered a rifle hidden in one of their bags. The alarm went off, and all hell broke loose. The carefully orchestrated plan completely fell apart in mere minutes.
The whole thing went south fast. The mercenaries were trapped. They couldn't carry out their mission. So, in a desperate move, they hijacked an Air India jetliner. And that's how the operation ended. Not with a victory, but with a dramatic escape.
It's almost hard to believe, but that's the way it went. They hijacked the plane and flew it to Durban, South Africa, where they hoped to escape and avoid capture.
It's a classic example of a mission gone wrong. And it's all tied to a larger issue: the role of mercenaries in international conflict and the lengths they'll go to for money or political gain.
That's a great point. But before we get deeper into the international consequences, let's pause here. In the next part of the series, we'll look at what happened after the coup failed, those who were arrested, the charges they faced, and how the events of the Seychelles affair changed the way the world thought about mercenaries.
Trust me, part 2 is even more dramatic, with courtroom battles, political negotiations, and even a bit of amnesty thrown in. Don't miss it.
Podcast title, The Seychelles Affair, Part 2, The Aftermath and the Legal Trials.
Welcome back to All About Law and History. In Part 1, we covered the dramatic failure of Mike Hoare's coup attempt in Seychelles. Now, in Part 2, we're diving into the aftermath: the arrests, the legal trials, and the lasting impact on international law.
It didn't end with the failed coup. Far from it. After the mercenaries were captured, they were faced with serious charges. The government of Seychelles charged several men with treason under Seychelles law. Treason! And that wasn't all. 4 of them were sentenced to death.
That's chilling, especially since the death penalty was on the table for them. However, after political negotiations and a hefty settlement of $3 million, the death sentences were eventually commuted, and the mercenaries were pardoned. It was a complex and politically charged situation.
Meanwhile, Hoare and those who managed to escape to South Africa were facing even more serious charges. The hijacking of the Air India jetliner was no small matter. In South Africa, they were charged under aviation laws, and Hoare himself was sentenced to 10 years in prison for his role.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. Hoare was released early under amnesty. So, despite the dramatic events and the lives put at risk, there was a political angle at play. He walked away with a reduced sentence.
And let's not forget the international ramifications. The United Nations took notice. Resolutions 496 and 507 condemned mercenary activity, especially what had happened in Seychelles. This wasn't just a small regional issue, it raised serious concerns on a global scale.
Absolutely. The United Nations even went on to adopt the 1989 Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries, aiming to prevent similar incidents in the future. And the Organization of African Unity also passed a convention condemning mercenaries. This was a major step in regulating mercenary activity globally.
It's fascinating how the Seychelles affair contributed to shaping international law. It sent a message that mercenaries could no longer be seen as just rogue players. They were now officially recognized as a threat to sovereignty and stability.
And then there's the personal legacy of Mike Hoare. In his telling, he portrayed the failed coup as an adventure that went horribly wrong. He blamed unreliable allies and a lack of preparation. But legally, what he did was far more serious. It was an assault on the sovereignty of a nation, involving treason, hijacking, and a total disregard for international norms.
It's hard to see how he could justify it as an adventure. For Seychelles, the coup attempt only strengthened René's government and pushed the country toward greater stability.
And, in a broader sense, it showed the world the urgency of regulating mercenary activity. The Seychelles affair was a wake-up call. What happened there in 1981 wouldn't be allowed to slide under the radar anymore.
It really put mercenaries on the map in terms of international law. Looking back, it's clear that the Seychelles affair wasn't just a failed coup. It was a pivotal moment in shaping the way the world dealt with private military forces.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most audacious plans don't just fail, they change history.
And they leave behind a legal legacy that lasts for generations. It was an affair that started with ambition, but ended up reshaping international law.
And that's a wrap for this series on the Seychelles affair. We hope you enjoyed diving into this intriguing chapter of history with us. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating intersections of law and history.
See you next time.